I never imagined we would miss our daughter's wedding because my husband couldn't find his favorite hat. Even now, saying those words out loud makes me feel embarrassed. If someone had told me this story a year ago, I would have laughed and said, no loving father would ever let something so ridiculous happen. I was wrong. The strange part wasn't that he couldn't find the hat. The strange part was what happened after we found it. My name is Linda. I'm 63 years old, and before I retired, I worked as a cashier at the same grocery store for almost 35 years. My husband, Robert, is 66. We've been married for 40 years. If you had met Robert, you probably would have described him as dependable, quiet, polite, the kind of man who always arrived 15 minutes early and never forgot to lock the front door. He wasn't controlling, he wasn't angry, he simply liked things done a certain way. For most of our marriage, I thought those little routines made him charming. Looking back now, I wonder if they were warning signs. Our daughter Emily was getting married on a warm Saturday in June. She was 31. After almost 6 years together, she and Daniel had finally chosen a small lakeside venue about 2 hours from our house. Nothing extravagant, just close family, close friends, good food, and the kind of celebration that felt warm instead of fancy. Emily had spent months planning every detail. She called me almost every evening. Mom, do you think ivory flowers look better than white? Mom, should we put candles on every table? Mom, do you think Dad will cry? I always laughed at that last question. No, I told her, your father doesn't cry. She laughed too. You've obviously never seen him watch old dog movies. That was Emily. She always knew how to make us smile. 3 weeks before the wedding, she came over for dinner carrying 2 garment bags. One held her wedding dress. The other held Robert's navy suit after she'd had it professionally pressed. She walked into the dining room, pointed her finger at him, and smiled. Dad, I have one request. Robert looked up from his newspaper. What is it? Wear the navy suit. I will. And, she paused dramatically, please don't wear that old brown hat. Robert lowered the newspaper just enough for me to see the little smile forming on his face. What hat? Emily rolled her eyes. You know exactly which one. The lucky one? There is no such thing as a lucky hat. There is if you've had it for 15 years. She laughed. I'm serious. You'll be indoors. You'll look handsome without it. Robert folded the newspaper carefully. I'll think about it. Emily looked at me. Mom? I shrugged. You know your father. She sighed dramatically. I swear he's more attached to that hat than he is to me. Robert smiled without looking up. Impossible. It became a running joke over the next few weeks. Every phone call ended the same way. No hat, Dad. We'll see. Even Daniel started teasing him. If you wear that thing in our wedding photos, Emily might crop you out. Robert laughed louder than anyone else. None of us realized he wasn't joking as much as we thought. That old brown hat had been with him through almost every important moment of our family's life. Vacations, birthdays, graduations, even Emily's college ceremony. I never questioned why. It was just Robert being Robert. The evening before the wedding, everything was ready. The gifts were packed, the suit was hanging by the bedroom door, the car was washed, the directions were printed, even though we both had GPS. Robert checked the weather forecast twice. "No rain," he said with satisfaction. "Perfect." I kissed him on the cheek. "See? Nothing to worry about," he smiled. "I know." If only I had known that less than 12 hours later, one missing hat would bring our entire family to a stop. I woke up before my alarm that morning. The house was unusually quiet. For a few seconds, I simply lay there smiling. "Our little girl is getting married today," I whispered to myself. After months of planning, endless phone calls, and more wedding magazines than any person should own, the day had finally arrived. I got dressed early, made coffee, and started preparing a small breakfast. Robert was already awake. That surprised me. Normally, he liked to sleep in whenever he had the chance. Instead, I found him standing in our bedroom, staring into the closet. "You okay?" I asked. Without turning around, he answered, "I'm looking for my hat." I smiled. "Emily told you not to wear it." "I know." "So just wear the suit." "I will." "With the hat." I laughed. "You are unbelievable." He didn't laugh back. That should have been my first warning. I finished getting ready while he continued searching. 5 minutes later, I heard drawers opening, then closets, then boxes being moved in the garage. By the time I walked outside, he'd already searched half the house. "You still haven't found it?" He shook his head. "It was here." "When did you wear it last?" "I don't remember." "Well," I smiled, "then maybe today's the perfect day to leave it behind." His expression changed. Not angry, not frustrated, just uncomfortable. "I need that hat." There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not stubbornness, need. I tried to lighten the mood. "Robert, it's just a hat." He looked directly at me. "No." "It isn't." Before I could ask what he meant, my phone rang. Emily. "Morning, Mom." "You guys almost ready?" I looked toward Robert, who was now opening another closet. "We're getting there." She laughed. I knew Dad would still be polishing his shoes. "You know your father. Tell him I expect him here before the photographer starts." "I will." "And remind him—" "No hat?" She laughed. "Exactly." When I hung up, I walked back into the bedroom. Robert was now looking underneath the bed. I actually laughed. "What exactly do you think happened? The hat grew legs?" He didn't answer. Instead, he got down on one knee and reached farther underneath. Nothing. Then the attic, then the laundry room, then the guest bedroom. Our departure time came and went. I looked at the clock. 9:10. We had planned to leave at 9. The ceremony started at 11:30. It was a 2-hour drive. "Robert, we have to go." 5 more minutes. I nodded. 5 minutes seemed reasonable. 10 minutes later, he was searching the garage again. This time he was opening old storage bins we hadn't touched in years. "What are you doing?" "It has to be here." "It doesn't." "It does." I crossed my arms. "Listen to me. You have 6 other hats. They're not the same. So wear one of those." "I can't." "You can." "I won't." There was complete silence. Then my phone rang again. Emily. This time she sounded slightly nervous. "Mom." "Are you guys on the road?" I looked at Robert. He was standing perfectly still in the garage, staring at an old wooden shelf. I couldn't tell her the truth. "Almost." "Traffic?" "Not exactly." She laughed. "Is Dad looking for that hat?" I forced myself to laugh, too. "You know him." "Oh, Mom." I was joking. So was I lied. When I ended the call, I walked into the garage. I put my hand on Robert's shoulder. Please. Emily is waiting. He closed his eyes. I know. Then let's go. He slowly shook his head. I can't. I stared at him. What do you mean you can't? He swallowed hard. I can't go without it. For the first time in 40 years, I realized this wasn't about a missing hat anymore. Something else was keeping my husband from walking out that front door. I wish I could tell you that I convinced him, that I grabbed another hat, shoved it onto his head, and dragged him into the car. That's what every sensible person would have done. Instead, I stood there looking at the man I'd loved for 40 years, and I realized something was terribly wrong. Robert wasn't being stubborn. He was scared. I just didn't know of what. I took a deep breath. Robert, look at me. He finally did. His eyes were red, not from crying, from holding something back. Tell me what's really going on. He looked away almost immediately. I told you. I need my hat. No. I shook my head. You need something. But it isn't the hat. He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Instead, he walked back into the house. I followed him from room to room as he searched the same places he'd already searched twice. The bedroom, the hallway closet, the laundry room, the garage, the pantry, even the coat closet by the front door. Each time he opened a door, I noticed something. He wasn't really looking anymore. His hands moved automatically, his eyes barely focused, almost as if he hoped the search itself would keep us from leaving. My phone buzzed again. Emily. This time I couldn't bring myself to answer. A few seconds later, she sent a text. Mom, everything okay? Then another. Photographer is asking where Dad is. I slipped the phone back into my purse without replying. Robert was now standing in our bedroom, staring at the empty shelf where he usually kept the hat. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I walked over quietly. What if, I began carefully, we stop looking? No response. What if we leave now and buy you another hat on the way? He actually smiled, a sad smile. It wouldn't be the same. I know. But Emily doesn't care about the hat. He whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I do. Another silence filled the room. Outside, I heard birds singing, neighbors mowing their lawns, someone laughing down the street. It felt strange that the whole world was moving forward, while our house seemed completely frozen. I checked the time, 9:47. If we left immediately, we'd arrive just before the ceremony, barely. I picked up my car keys. I'm leaving in 2 minutes. He nodded. I understand. Those 3 words hurt more than if he'd argued. I waited. 1 minute, then another. He never reached for his jacket, never picked up the suit bag, never walked toward the front door. He simply remained standing beside the bed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I carried everything to the car by myself, the gifts, our overnight bag, his suit, my purse. I started the engine. Then I looked back toward the house. He was standing in the front window now, watching me, not waving, not calling out, just watching. I put the car into reverse, backed halfway down the driveway, then stopped. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave him behind. Not today. Not like this. I pulled back into the driveway and walked inside. Robert hadn't moved. "I can't go without you," I said softly. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." "No, I'm sorry. We're missing our daughter's wedding." "I know." "Then tell me why." He closed his eyes. For several long seconds, I thought he was finally going to tell me. Instead, he asked a question, one that made no sense at all. "Linda, do you remember who gave me that hat?" I frowned. "Of course I do." "It was Emily." "For your 50th birthday." He nodded slowly. "And do you remember what she wrote inside it?" I did. I remembered the day as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. Emily had been 16. She'd worked all summer at an ice cream shop just to buy that hat. When Robert opened the box, she'd laughed and said, "Now you'll finally have something nice to wear when you embarrass me." Inside the sweatband, she'd written the words herself with a black marker. "To the best dad in the world." Robert sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't think I'm that man anymore." At that moment, I finally understood. The missing hat had never been keeping my husband from the wedding. He was trying to protect himself from something much harder than saying goodbye. He was terrified that after today, our little girl wouldn't need her dad anymore. For a long time, neither of us said a word. Robert sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. I sat beside him. 40 years of marriage had taught me something important. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop trying to fix the problem and simply listen. After nearly a minute, he finally spoke. "You know what everyone keeps saying?" I shook my head. "They keep telling me this is the beginning of Emily's new life." I smiled gently. "It is." He nodded. "I know. But nobody talks about what it means for us." His voice cracked for the first time. "For fathers." I reached for his hand. He squeezed mine without looking at me. When she was 5, I held her hand every time we crossed the street. When she was 10, she wouldn't ride her bike unless I ran beside her. When she was 16, she asked me to teach her how to drive. A small smile appeared on his face. She nearly drove us into Mrs. Patterson's mailbox. I laughed through my tears. I remember. Mrs. Patterson never let her forget it. He smiled for a second, then it disappeared. And today, another man will hold her hand. He'll dance with her. He'll build a home with her. He'll become the person she calls first. His shoulders dropped. I know that's how life is supposed to work. I really do. But I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm being left behind. That sentence broke my heart, not because it was dramatic, because it was honest. I suddenly realized this fear hadn't appeared that morning. It had probably been growing inside him for months, maybe even years. The wedding hadn't created it. The wedding had simply forced him to face it. I looked toward the closet. "The hat," I said quietly. It wasn't your lucky hat. He slowly shook his head. No. It was the last thing that still made me feel like Emily's dad. You are Emily's dad. I always will be. Then why does it feel like my job is over? I didn't know how to answer, because every parent asks that question eventually. No one prepares you for the day your child no longer needs permission, no longer needs rides, no longer needs bedtime stories. They still love you, but they no longer need you in the same way. I checked my phone. 10:18. The ceremony would begin in a little over an hour. If we left right now, we might still make it. Barely. I stood up. Robert? He didn't answer. I need you to hear something. He finally looked at me. Emily isn't getting married because she stopped needing her father. She's getting married because you spent 31 years teaching her what love looks like. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you taught her to trust. You taught her to laugh. You taught her what a good man looks like. I smiled through my tears. If she chose Daniel, it's because she grew up watching you. He stared at me. His eyes filled for the first time. Real tears, not hidden ones, not the kind men try to blink away. They rolled quietly down his face. I never thought of it that way. I knelt in front of him. You aren't losing a daughter today. You're watching the life you helped build. He covered his face with both hands. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was his breathing. Then he whispered something that almost made me cry again. I found the hat. I froze. What? He slowly lowered his hands. I found it almost an hour ago. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You found it? He nodded. It was in the hall closet. The whole time, I stared at him completely speechless. Then why did you keep looking? His answer came so quietly, I almost missed it. Because if I kept searching, I didn't have to leave. At that moment, everything finally made sense. The missing hat, the endless searching, the excuses. None of it had been about an old brown hat. My husband had been searching for 1 more hour with the little girl who used to hold his hand. Neither of us moved. The clock on the bedroom wall read 10:24. The ceremony would begin in just over an hour. For the first time that morning, I didn't care about the schedule. I cared about the man sitting in front of me. He looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, as if he'd been carrying something much heavier than a missing hat. I reached into the hall closet. Without saying a word, I picked up the old brown hat. It was exactly where he said it was, sitting on the top shelf, perfectly visible. I turned it over in my hands. The brim was worn. The ribbon had started to fade. Inside, the black handwriting was still there. To the best dad in the world. Emily's 16-year-old handwriting hadn't changed in all these years. I smiled sadly. You've taken good care of it. Robert nodded. I've tried. I walked back into the bedroom and placed the hat beside him. He looked at it, but didn't touch it. I thought if I couldn't find it, I wouldn't have to watch her walk away. I sat beside him again. She's not walking away. He let out a tired laugh. Isn't she? No. She's walking forward, and she's hoping you'll be walking beside her." He stared at the floor. "I almost let this stupid hat take that away from her." I placed my hand over his. "No, you almost let your fear take it away." "The hat was just hiding it." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he finally asked the question he'd been avoiding all morning. "Do you think she'll forgive me?" I answered without hesitation, "Yes." "But you need to stop apologizing to me and start driving." For the first time that day, he smiled. A real smile, small but real. He picked up the hat, looked at it for several seconds. Then something happened that surprised me. He stood up, walked to the closet, opened the top shelf, and carefully placed the hat back where it belonged. I watched without saying a word. He closed the closet door. "I'm not wearing it." I smiled. "I think Emily will like that." He shook his head. "I'm not doing it for Emily. I'm doing it for me. I don't need a hat to remind me who I am. I've been her father every single day for 31 years. No piece of clothing can change that." Those were the strongest words I'd heard him say all morning. 10 minutes later, we were finally in the car. Neither of us spoke much. The GPS estimated 1 hour and 53 minutes. The ceremony had already started. Robert kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel. "I ruined today." "You haven't ruined anything yet." "I missed walking her down the aisle." "You don't know that." "I do. I know what time it is." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we finally turned onto the long road leading to the venue, I noticed something. Cars were still arriving. Guests were standing outside. Some were checking their phones. Others were talking in small groups. Something wasn't right. Robert parked without saying a word. Before we could even get out of the car, Emily's wedding planner came running toward us. "Oh, thank goodness you're here." I looked at her in confusion. "I'm so sorry we're late." She blinked. "Late? We've been waiting for you." My heart skipped a beat. "Waiting? For us?" She nodded. "The ceremony hasn't started." I looked at Robert. Neither of us understood. The planner smiled. "Emily refused to walk down the aisle without her father." I felt tears filling my eyes. "But we're almost 2 hours late." "I know." "Everyone kept telling her to begin." "She wouldn't." The planner laughed softly. "She just kept saying, 'My dad will come. I know he will.'" Robert's face went completely pale. He whispered almost to himself, "She waited." The planner smiled warmly. "She said there was no wedding without the man who taught her what love looks like." At that moment, my husband broke down completely. Not because he had lost his little girl, but because, without realizing it, she had been waiting to prove that she still needed her dad. I don't remember getting out of the car. One moment I was standing beside Robert. The next we were walking as fast as we could toward the ceremony. Robert kept shaking his head. I made her wait. I made everyone wait. I squeezed his arm. "No, she chose to wait. Those are two very different things." As we reached the entrance, I heard soft piano music drifting across the lake. Guests turned to look at us. For a second, I wanted to disappear. I expected annoyed faces, whispers, judgment. Instead, people smiled. Several even stepped aside to clear a path. An older gentleman touched Robert's shoulder. "She's been looking for you all morning." Robert couldn't answer. His throat had closed completely. The wedding planner quietly opened the doors. Inside, everyone was already seated. The music stopped. Every head turned toward us. Emily was standing at the end of the aisle. Her bouquet trembled slightly in her hands. The moment she saw her father, she smiled. Not an angry smile, not a relieved smile, just the smile of a daughter who had never stopped believing. Robert froze. "I can't." I looked at him. "Yes, you can." He took one slow step, then another. Emily met him halfway down the aisle. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't ask why he was late. She simply wrapped her arms around him. For nearly 30 seconds, neither of them spoke. The entire room was silent, except for quiet sniffles from the guests. Finally, Robert whispered, "I'm so sorry." Emily pulled back just enough to look at him. "I know. I thought you wouldn't forgive me." She smiled through her tears. "Dad, I wasn't waiting for the hat. I was waiting for you." Robert covered his face with one hand. "I almost ruined your wedding." Emily gently shook her head. "No, you almost missed it." "There's a difference." She reached into her small bridal purse and pulled out something folded neatly. It was a photograph, old. The edges were worn. She handed it to him. Robert stared at it. It was taken 16 years earlier, the day he'd worn that same brown hat to her high school graduation. His arm was around her shoulders. Both of them were laughing. On the back, she'd written another note years ago. "You'll always be my dad, no matter how old I get, no matter where life takes me." Robert's hands began to shake. "I forgot you gave me this." Emily smiled. "I didn't." Then she looked down at his empty hands. "No hat today?" Robert laughed through his tears. "I almost wore it. But then I realized I don't need it anymore." She tilted her head. "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because for years, I thought that hat reminded me I was a good father." He swallowed hard. "But today, you reminded me." Emily hugged him again. The guests applauded softly. Even Daniel wiped his eyes. The officiant smiled and said, "I think now we're finally ready." Robert offered his arm. Emily slipped hers through it, just as she had when she was a little girl crossing busy streets. They walked the rest of the aisle together, slowly. Neither of them wanted those final steps to end. As I watched my husband give our daughter away, I suddenly understood something. Parents spend years believing that one day they will have to let go. But that's not what really happens. You don't let go of your child. You simply learn to hold them differently. Later that evening, after the dancing had started and everyone was laughing again, I noticed Robert walk outside alone. I found him standing near the lake, watching the sunset. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He smiled. "I spent all morning looking for a hat, when the only thing I was really afraid of was discovering that I wasn't needed anymore." I slipped my hand into his. "And?" He looked back through the windows of the reception hall. Inside, Emily caught his eye from across the room. She smiled and waved exactly the way she had when she was 6 years old. Robert waved back. Then he looked at me. "I guess A father never stops being needed. He just gets needed in different ways. For the first time that day, I knew everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. It's been almost a year since Emily's wedding. The old brown hat is still in our hall closet, exactly where Robert left it that morning. Only now, it means something completely different. Every now and then, I'll catch him opening the closet. He'll smile at it. Then he'll close the door again without touching it. One afternoon, I finally asked, "Why don't you wear it anymore?" He smiled, "Because I don't need to." That answer made perfect sense. A few months after the wedding, Emily and Daniel bought their first house. It wasn't very big. The paint needed work. The backyard was mostly weeds. The kitchen looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Emily called us the same evening. "Dad, do you think you could help us?" Robert didn't even let her finish. "I'll be there tomorrow." For the next 6 weekends, he drove to their house every Saturday morning. He fixed cabinet doors, installed shelves, repaired a leaking faucet, built a wooden bench for the front porch. Daniel tried to pay him more than once. Robert always refused. "I'm investing in my grandchildren," he'd joke. Emily would roll her eyes. "Dad." "We haven't even talked about having kids yet," he'd grin. "I'm planning ahead." One Saturday, I watched the 3 of them working together in the backyard. Daniel was learning how to use a power saw. Emily was planting flowers. Robert was giving advice nobody had asked for. Everyone was laughing. On the drive home, I looked at him. "You were wrong." He glanced at me. "About what?" "You thought your job as a father was over." He smiled quietly. "I know. It just changed." A few weeks later, Emily invited us over for dinner. As we were leaving, she walked Robert to the front door. I stayed behind for a moment, pretending to look at the family photos on the wall. That's when I heard her say something I'll never forget. "Dad, I know you were scared that I wouldn't need you anymore." He looked surprised. "I never told you that." "You didn't have to," she smiled. "I've known you my whole life." Then she wrapped her arms around him. "I'll always need you. Maybe not to teach me how to ride a bike anymore. Maybe not to drive me to school. But I'll always need my dad." Robert didn't answer right away. He simply hugged her a little tighter. On the way home, neither of us spoke much. When we pulled into our driveway, he looked toward the house and chuckled. "What is it?" I asked. I almost missed the happiest day of my daughter's life because I thought I was losing her. He shook his head. I couldn't have been more wrong. I slipped my hand into his. "You weren't losing a daughter. You were gaining a new chapter," he smiled. And I almost let an old hat keep me from seeing it. Sometimes people ask me if this story is really about a hat. I always tell them the truth. No, it never was. It was about a father who was afraid that love had an ending, only to discover that real love simply changes its shape. And every time I visit Emily's house now, I see the wooden bench Robert built sitting on her front porch. People compliment it all the time. They think it's just a bench. I smile every time I hear that, because I know what it really is. It's proof that a father's place in his daughter's life doesn't disappear when she gets married. Sometimes it simply moves to a different seat.